play simple. You're leaving space and holes for people to fill in.
I am Charlie Watts. I am the drummer.
Not to get in the way, not to be really noticed.
I'm Brian Jones, a guitarist and harmonica player.
Because if you did the right thing, you don't get noticed. And that's the way I play. Very simple.
Keith Richards, guitar. Mick Jagger, I sing.
Bill Wyman, I play bass. Guitar.
You've always been the silent stone. That's been the image.
Great stone face, I know.
When you think about Bill Wyman, you probably picture that quiet guy in the back of the Rolling Stones.
I see a line of cars and they are painted black.
I remember seeing Bill when we first rehearsed up the road in a pub. You know, he'd had a different sort of upbringing. He's locked into an era that was before us, really. So when we got on the road, I think it was like liberation for him.
With flowers and my love hope never to come back.
Bill had a very individual style that wasn't particularly hip or cool, but he was his own person.
I've seen people turn their heads and quickly look away.
He had a tremendous presence, but he didn't impose himself. Stoneface, I think people called him or referred to him as Stoneface. He was rake thin.
Maybe then I'll fade away and I have to face the facts.
Always cool, always steady, never trying to steal the spotlight.
It's not easy facing up when your whole world is black.
And when he smiled, which wasn't that frequently, his whole face lit up in a sort of great crease of a smile. And he always had an air of world weariness.
No more will my green seagull turn a deeper blue.
But way before he was holding down the groove for one of the greatest rock bands ever,
I could not foresee this thing happening.
Bill's journey with the bass guitar started in a pretty humble and very DIY way. Bill Wyman, back then still known as William Perks,
I remember standing out in the streets with all the local families and watching the formations of German bombers going over. It was just droning, just this sound.
grew up in South London during the tough days of World War II.
There was a German fighter bomber roaring up the street towards us, firing his guns. As it passed, I ran down the street to where my grandmother was waiting for me. She grabbed me and ran to go down the back of the stairs to the air raid shelter.
Things changed in the late 50s when he was serving in the Royal Air Force in Germany.
I went into the military in 55. Thank God I got the strength when I was in the military to be able to stand up for myself and fight for my beliefs. Before that, I couldn't.
Rock and roll was exploding, and Bill caught the bug.
We heard the beginnings of rock and roll. I could go to the American PSI shops and buy the first little 45 records. It was just like brand new music. It just blew me away. And I had to be involved in it. I had to. I went straight down into Oldenburg town and I bought my first acoustic guitar. When I came out on military on leave, I went to the cinema, the Regal Cinema in Beckenham with a couple of friends. About 10 minutes further into the film was this black guy with a little moustache in a white suit, this little Gibson Les Paul guitar. Chuck Berry. And that just blew my mind. My hair went on the back of my neck. I thought, fucking hell. It just blew me away. This guy was doing the duck walk across the stage and shaking his legs and shuddering. And the audience are laughing. They all thought it was a comedy show or something. And I'm sitting there thinking, this is the most incredible thing that's ever happened to me.
By 1961, he was playing in a local band called the Cliftons. It was small time, but it gave him the chance to really get comfortable as a bass player.
I'm out of the military, and that's when the Cliftons came into existence.
And just as important, it taught him something that would stick with him forever. It's not about showing off, it's about making the song work.
I went to my sister's house for the weekend, and we went to a dance, and I heard the bass. I heard the real bass guitar for the first time. The low sound just filled you up, right down there, you know, when everybody else was playing up high. And I thought, God, that's what's missing in the Cliftons. And I asked them all, I said, Steve, you want to play bass? No. Cliff, do you want to play bass? No. Fuck it, I suppose I better do it then.
Group, and I had to play bass because nobody else did, you know.
Why do you play bass? Nobody else did.
Yeah, because there's more guitarists and less bass players.
Here's the thing. Bass players were rare back then, and being a bassist meant more chances to get gigs. But there was a problem. Bill didn't have the cash for a real bass guitar.
He didn't have a bass guitar because he couldn't afford to buy one.
So what did he do?
I just messed about with the guitar at home.
What he did was detune 2 or 3 of the top strings of an ordinary 6-string. And he made what he made of it, which is brilliant, you know. And I think we may have all clubbed together to buy the bass guitar.
Classic Bill Wyman move. He made one himself. He bought a cheap second-hand guitar, beefed it up with heavy strings, and basically turned it into a bass.
We bought it, and it was the most ugly, horrible thing. I turned this bass over, got some chalk, and redrew the body. And I went down the road to my friend who had a fretwork machine. I said, I want you to cut all this out. And he went, are you serious? I said, yes, cut it out. Took it home, put all new electrics in it, put another pickup in, Baldwin pickup, stripped it all down, took all the frets out. Then I had to buy new strings, these framer strings, which were really springy and soft. And I bought this amplifier. Fucking thing, every time I touched it, I get electrocuted because it didn't have an earth. I bought an 18-inch Goodman speaker, the biggest speaker there was.
It wasn't fancy, but it worked.
And when I played this bass, Jesus, the sound. I mean, it was amazing. Without knowing it, I invented the fretless bass.
In that moment, messing around with his homemade bass was really the first time Bill Wyman played bass for real. Later, he said, I had to build my own bass. I couldn't afford to buy one. And in a way, it made me understand the instrument better. It made it mine.
The stuff that we were all listening to, there weren't many bass players on any of those records. And I remember seeing Bill playing and thinking, what? Oh, a bass player. And he looked like a teddy boy. I thought, where's he come from?
Bill didn't have lessons or fancy teachers. He just listened to his favorite records and taught himself how to lock into the rhythm.
You know, his bass playing was fantastic, really unique.
His style became all about feel and groove. No flashy solos, no over-the-top stuff. Just pure rhythm, making everything else sound better.
I always wanted to be a musician. I always wanted to be in a band. And I knew it was so impossible and so unlikely that I would be, that I just dismissed it completely from my mind. And suddenly, last year, I remembered, you know, after all that time, suddenly remembered that I'd always wanted to be, and now I was, you know. It didn't mean a thing to me anymore. It's such a big ambition, it was unobtainable when I was little.
Fast forward to late 1962.
Forming the Cliftons was a breath of fresh air. I'd fallen in love with playing music. We were doing all these gigs and working hard, but the trouble was, those shite promoters, they owed us so much money, they just wouldn't pay us. And so the bottom started to fall out of the band. Tony Chapman answered an ad for a drummer with an R&B band.
That night we went back to Mick's parents' house and they played Jimmy Reed and various things that I never heard. I think they quite liked the way I played because I could play the shuffle beat, which most people couldn't. And that's how I got to play with the Stones, really.
Bill heard about a scrappy little blues band looking for a bass player.
Tony came to me and said, bass player's left, you want to come up to rehearsal on Friday? So I went up with him and had my big bass cabinet in the boot of his car sticking out and took my homemade bass and I went to the Weatherby Arms in Chelsea.
He showed up to audition and bonus points. He had his own amp, which impressed everyone.
I went in and there they were, Ian Stewart. He was nice when I went in there. Mick was fairly sociable. And Brian and Keith just didn't speak to me. They were up at the bar and they were really beatniky. I bought them all around a drink, so then they got a bit more friendly and passed the cigarettes round. So then they were sociable, you know. They didn't have any money or anything. They asked me what music I liked and what music I played. So I said, well, Chuck Berry, and they went, great. Jerry Lee Lewis, no. Eddie Cochran, no. All the rock and rollers, they didn't like any of them. They said, we're a blues band, we're not a rock and roll band. We don't play that shit.
It didn't take long for Bill Wyman to become the newest member of the Rolling Stones.
They'd already spoken to Charlie Watts, so they fired Tony. And Charlie said he'd join. I kind of slotted in all right.
I say, yeah, 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 it's
I was a bit of a rock and roller, more than anything else, and found that they were playing the pure blues.
His first gigs with them were raw and wild.
I'm gonna tell you how it's gonna be. You're gonna give your love to me.
Bill's steady bass lines gave the Stones the backbone they needed.
The audience just stood and sort of stared at us because we didn't have no uniforms, we didn't have any matching guitars, and we played just blues and R&B, which was alien to them. And then this crowd goes in H.
Looking back, it's kind of amazing. A guy who built his first bass by hand ended up helping shape the sound of rock and roll.
We were just so different from any other band. We played different music to them. We played it in a different way. We played it better than them.
Tracks like Come On, Under My Thumb, and Jumpin' Jack Flash wouldn't have been the same without his subtle, steady playing.
Keith had all the licks off. And then you got Mick up front, who's just all over the bloody stage with the maracas and the tambourine and all that. The greatest front man there's ever been.
Bill Wyman never tried to be the loudest or the flashiest.
It was a special band, and we could blow anyone off the stage, no matter who it was.
His magic was all about feel, space, and groove. And that's what made him one of the most respected bass players in music history.
Play simple. You're leaving space and holes for people to fill in, not to get in the way, not to be really noticed. Because if you did the right thing, you don't get noticed. And that's the way I play. Very simple.
And it all started with a second-hand guitar, some heavy strings, and a lot of determination.
Almost every bass player I've ever met is always a big guy with huge hands. When I was a little boy, you know, all my heroes were the little guys. I think there's something about being a little guy. You always want to prove that you can still do it against the big guys. And that's the drive. And it's been my drive all my life. You make your own way, don't you? You just head in directions that you think are good at the time. Something magical happened, something unusual, something rare, which shouldn't have really happened to a working class boy from South London. And it's bizarre. It's a bizarre life I've had.
Bill Wyman, I play bass, guitar.